وقل رب زدني علما.
The reason why I say it's quite a serious question is it's not something that ordinary Christians every day they think about it.
No, I agree.
They have thought about it in their daily life.
Yeah, you agree. That's fair. That's a fair point.
Yeah. But it's important to know your belief, right? It's important to know who you worship
and what you worship.
What
is it you're worshipping?
But you can keep asking deeper and deeper questions like this.
Yes.
And this is one question that is deeper than I've ever thought about before. Thank you for asking it for that reason alone. But you can always keep asking deeper and deeper questions. So
And we will.
So therefore, say,
Come back next week and we'll ask even more questions.
Come back next week.
All right, the week after. There's more to come.
Therefore, you can say that I don't know Jesus because you've only asked a deeper question than I never thought about it before. It's not fair to say I don't know Jesus for that reason.
No, I didn't say you don't know Jesus. What I'm saying is, if you are going to worship someone, you should know who you worship. This is a general rule,
And
right?
what you are worshipping.
And what you worship.
But we can't fully know Jesus. There's always more we can learn.
Yes.
There's always more we can learn. There's always deeper questions we can
Now,
answer.
since now we have introduced you to this understanding of Jesus Christ, do you agree then, whether it makes you a heretic or not, it's not my point, that if he was a human being, if you believe he was a human being, he must have a human will?
To me, when we say he had a human will, because he had a divine will as well, all that means is he had human desires.
Why do you now say, so God doesn't have a will, he has only desires?
No.
When it comes to God, you give God a will, but when it comes to
He had a will, yes, Jesus had a will before he came to earth.
Right. So as a human being, did he have a human will?
He certainly had human desires. I'm not sure it makes sense to say he had a human will. Doesn't make sense
What's
to
the
me.
difference between a will and a desire?
A desire is like my English is not up to me explaining these words. It's like if you're hungry, do you have a desire to eat? It's something you need. It's something you need.
Do you make choices with your desires sometimes?
Yes.
Has Jesus done that?
Yeah, but that could have been his divine will. That could have been his divine will.
But did he choose the 12 disciples? Did Jesus choose the 12 disciples? Peter, James, John,
In some way, it may have been the Father told him to choose those 12, but yes, he gave the act to do those.
And did he choose? Are you saying only the divine bit of Jesus made that decision, or did it as a human being did he make that decision as well? To choose those 12 disciples?
I don't see any reason why that wasn't his divine will that making that choice.
So, do you have a problem with Jesus, a human being, choosing 12 disciples? Do you have a problem with that?
No.
Neither do we. So what's the problem? You disagree with us? QED.
And what if I disagree with you? And what if I
So
disagree
you are
with
now
you?
giving human Jesus a choice. If you don't have a will, can you have a choice? Can you make choices for
As a divine being, he had a choice. As a divine being, he had
As a
a choice.
human being, why are you depriving him of a will?
Because he had a will already. Because he had a will before he became a human being. That's why I'm doing it.
That's not the human will, is it?
I don't see
That's
any
the will.
reason.
That's the will. He had it beforehand.
Yes.
So when he became human,
That will could have been the same.
so he's not fully human.
He didn't need to gain a new
Okay.
will. He didn't need to
So-
gain an extra will. I don't see why he has to gain a second
We now
will.
come back to the basic question. Jesus Christ is not fully human because he doesn't have a human will.
That's right. Therefore, you deny
I
the
don't see
incarnation.
that. I don't
Therefore,
see
you'd
that.
have
He
been
has
burnt
a
at the
will.
stake.
He has a will.
You'd have been burnt at the stake. You deny the incarnation. In Christian
No, I
England,
don't think I have.
Tyburn over
I don't think I
there
have.
is where Christian heretics
Burn people
were
at the
hung,
stake.
drawn, and quartered.
Right, they weren't
yeah.
burned at the stake.
No,
Right.
okay, I agree it's a bit better than being burned at the stake.
Here, they might
you
have been
were
somewhere else.
People like you, Flesh, were executed even 200 years
This
ago
is such a subtle issue that I don't see people were executed for this issue.
because the Church of England officially states that Jesus had two wills. If you
The
publicly
vast
deny that,
majority
you're
of the
executed.
people in the pews in those days were not educated people.
I'm not talking about
So
that.
they
I'm
would not have
talking
been able to think these issues through. They would have not have been able to
You
think these issues
deny his
through.
humanity.
I don't believe I have denied his humanity.
believe you have.
I don't believe I haven't denied that he had a will. All my issue is I don't see why that one will couldn't have been the will that was controlling him when he was a human being. And to me, that does not make him any less a human. The fact that it was a divine will.
The point I'm making is, if you confess, or if this is your belief, he's fully human. Remember, the point is fully human. Imagine now you have a
So he has a will. Doesn't mean he's not a divine will.
Douglas, if somebody is fully God and he has a will of a human only, would you call him fully God?
You need to know how he got into that state. You need to know how he got
If
into
you
that
call
state.
someone fully God without the will, but the will is substituted by a human will only, would you call that fully God?
I would guess not. But we need to know how somebody got into that state. We have to analyse this properly. We don't. You haven't told me that.
Douglas, let's deal with the concept of God. If someone is fully God, are we giving descriptions to God and say, but he doesn't have a godly will, he only has a substituted human will?
I don't
Would you call him
understand what the
fully God?
difference between a human will and a godly will is. Will is the ability to choose. The ability to choose. I don't see the difference between a human will and a divine will.
So you're saying the will of any agent, whether it's human or divine, is the same?
With my limited ignorant understanding, it could well be. With my limited ignorant understanding, yes, I can see why it couldn't be that.
Okay, I'm not going to go any further. Let's leave it to your concepts like this.
I'm just concerned you worship a human being indiscriminately with God. Worshipping God is cool.
I'm not
but you
concerned. I don't do
worship a
enough
man as
worship of
well.
God. I don't do that. I'm not sure I do any worship of God. If you're going to be really honest about this.
I'm saying you worship a man. You know he's a man. You admit to worshiping a
No, just do
man.
it. I am admitted to worship him.
No, you don't worship Jesus.
I'm not sure I do any worship at all. I should be worshipping Jesus, but I'm not sure I do any worship at all.
What exactly do you do as a Christian?
That's a good question.
I mean, what earth do you get up to?
I'm like that.
Oh well. That's not going to go very far.
The reason why I'm saying okay, let's leave it because you seem to be thinking like this. The attributes of the divine, some attributes can be same as the created. We believe, and I'm sure you believe as well, God's attributes are perfect. The human attributes, which may mirror something of his attributes, like we may be loving, we may be kind, merciful, but our attributes are not perfect. We have wills, but our wills are not perfect, are they? You somehow think
It's not
that
impossible for them to. It's true that they're not perfect, but it's not impossible for them to be perfect because Adam and Eve were sinless for certainly for several hours, if not several months. So it's possible. It's
sinlessness
possible for them to be
doesn't mean
perfect.
perfection, is it? You're equating sinlessness with perfection.
Yes, yeah, and I don't see what was the difference. Well, I don't see. I can't see a difference at the moment. Between sinlessness and perfection.
My cat is sinless. It's not perfect, believe me.
Your cat,
My cat.
is it alive?
It's Schrodinger's cat. No.
Is it alive?
Unless you open the box. Yeah, we don't. No, seriously, there are lots of creatures in the universe that are sinless. They don't have
You know
wills.
what I mean by perfect? Free from
No, it's not a moral agent. Your cat's not a moral agent.
Precisely.
I am a moral
Precisely.
agent.
So sinlessness is not the same as perfection. I find me saying that as an example.
Right, for moral agents. For moral agents.
Sinlessness does not equal perfection.
For moral agents. Okay, let me make this statement. Maybe you can knock it down and I'll learn something. For moral agents, sinlessness and perfection are the same thing.
The way I'm describing or defining perfection to you is free from all deficiencies, imperfections. All deficiencies free from. So in a human will, do you make will the choice correctly every single time?
To me, what you do with the will doesn't make it not perfect. Okay, it's wrong for me to choose to sin. Absolutely, it's wrong for me to choose to sin. That's not what I'm
When you
saying.
make choices, when you make inferences, when you make decisions, all of this, we are not perfect beings, are we?
Can I give an example of this? Adam and Eve were sinless but they still sinned ultimately.
Eventually, yes.
Hang on. So their sinless state as humans does not mean they're immune from sin ultimately. God's sinlessness, if you talk in those terms, is always going to be sinless.
No.
By virtue of the fact that he is God and does not sin.
No, Jesus was genuinely tempted.
Sinlessness.
Jesus was genuinely tempted.
You're assuming a point here. God never sins, he is sinless. Adam and Eve never sinned, but as they were finite, limited creatures, they were liable to sin.
Eventually they did.
sin.
Eventually.
So there's a difference between a sinless, finite creature and the sinlessness of God. One can and did sin, another one can never sin by definition.
I dispute. No, I think God can sin because God chose to limit himself to a human body, and as a limited being in the human body, he was therefore able to sin. As it happened, he didn't.
How many heresies
As it happened, he didn't.
You think
but
a
he was
perfect God
capable.
can sin?
Jesus was capable of sinning. He didn't do it, but he was capable.
Jesus wasn't God.
According to Islam theology, not according
To
Paul.
Jesus, he says, in John chapter 17 verse 1, what is eternal life? That you alone, according to God, are the one true God, and to believe that, and to believe in Jesus whom you have sent. He pointed away to himself from one
got the
true
right
God.
reference there.
Yeah. I'll have to look it up there. 17 verse 3.
Verse 3,
Definitely not verse 3.
the eternal life is that they know you, the one true God, and Jesus whom you sent.
What is, did
Oh,
Jesus
yeah,
say
right.
that?
Yeah. You saw a subtle different spin on it. That's why I didn't recognise it.
Spin? It is chapter 17.
17:3, yeah.
And this is eternal life. It is it. Look, 17. This is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. If Jesus was God, he would have said that you know me, the only true God. He doesn't say that. He says you, the only true God. Therefore, he's not including himself in the definition of the only true God.
He goes on to say things that definitely show he is including himself. I'm saying, only a couple of verses later, he goes on to say things that he
I
has
want
to
to
include.
understand your belief, right? As I said, I don't have a problem with your heretic beliefs if they're defined as heresy. It's not about labeling someone as
We will
a heretic.
report you to the church.
Okay? It's important.
You're welcome to.
Yeah. It's important.
I'm not sure they're going to do anything.
It's important that we speak to you on your beliefs rather than on someone else's beliefs. Do you believe?
Sorry, you're asking me about things I haven't talked about before.
No, think about it. These are interactions.
You're a bright guy, though. You're a bright guy.
It's not necessarily my belief, because I might go away and have to think about it.
Don't think about it. Okay. Do you accept God is perfect?
Inshallah.
Yes, but what does that word mean? What does that word
Free
mean?
from all deficiencies.
Okay, right. Yes, in that's right. Yes, I agree. God is that,
Always?
and I'm not.
Always? Or sometimes it's perfect. Sometimes it's
So
imperfect.
the way you define that, the way you mean free from all deficiencies, then no, because Jesus was not. The way you
Basically,
define it.
so you don't believe God is perfect.
What?
You believe God is perfect sometimes and imperfect some other times.
Well, how can it be a heresy? Now I've just
Say
said.
God is not perfect is a heresy in any book.
No, the way that Mansur means free from all
blasphemy
deficiencies,
as
that's
well.
a Muslim understanding of that term. Yes.
No, respect is
Jesus
not.
was not.
If you read Thomas Aquinas' Severe Theologica, the standard work on this, he talks in exactly these terms. He says God is the eternal, the unperfect, the unchanging God.
Jesus, when he was a man on earth, he was not
This is standard.
omnipotent.
No, we're not
He
talking
was not
about.
omnipotent. That wasn't what I
Indeed, he
meant.
wasn't. You're right, and that's precisely why he wasn't God.
I spent all night. He
We're
wasn't
not
all-knowing.
talking about Jesus. We're talking about God here, and you've got to separate them out in your mind. They're not the same. In the Bible,
No, I
they're not the
agree.
same.
Jesus is one member of the Trinity, but he is the divine being.
We're not talking about
He's
Jesus.
a divine
We're
being.
talking about God in his eternal aspect. And the way Mansur is talking, although it's Islamic, is also the way some Christian theologians speak as well. It's not just Mansur, it's how your people speak.
When I say God is not always free from all deficiencies in the way Mansur means it, I mean, yes, that's true, because Jesus, when
It's nothing to do with Jesus.
one member of the Trinity came to earth as Jesus, he was not free from all deficiencies in the way Mansur means that terminology.
Jesus only existed 2,000 years ago. Jesus never existed before the
I
incarnation.
dispute that. You know I don't
Seriously.
believe that. You know I don't believe that.
No, that's theologically heresy as well. Jesus came into existence as a man
He was
called
given
Jesus
that, he was given that
2,000 years
name
ago.
when he was born. That's
Yahweh wasn't
true.
called Jesus before that.
Yeah, you're right. He was
Thank
given
you.
that name when he was born as a baby.
And he wasn't a man then either, was he? as Yahweh.
He's a baby.
No, before the incarnation, was there a Jesus? Before the
There was a
incarnation.
second person of the Trinity.
I didn't ask you that. Before the incarnation, was there a Jesus? The human Jesus, a guy called Jesus.
No, there wasn't a human Jesus, no.
Or any Jesus that you liked.
There were people called Jesus, but that's not what we mean. That's not what we mean. No.
So yeah, Jesus didn't exist before the incarnation. So if you to contradict what he's saying on the basis of a historical technicality is to miss the point.
The person that became Jesus existed before the incarnation. The person that became Jesus
So
existed before
God
the
was
incarnation.
part human before the incarnation.
No.
You just said he was. Jesus
No,
was a human
he
being.
didn't take on, he hadn't
Jesus was a
become
human being who
incarnate.
lived in Nazareth 2,000 years ago. He did not exist as God or with
The
God before
person that
then.
became Jesus was not incarnate before the incarnation.
I agree. But he wasn't called Jesus.
But
he
he
was human.
existed. But he existed.
So the human Jesus existed.
No, the person that became incarnate existed before the incarnation.
Well, by definition, of course. What you've just said there, by definition.
So you say one part of the divine became imperfect. You still entertain
In the
the
way
idea.
you mean imperfect, yes.
So you still
In the way you mean
so you are
imperfect.
still entertaining the idea a perfect being can become imperfect.
In the way you mean the word imperfect, yes.
Yeah,
I'm not
that
sure
means-
that I
that
would
means-
use your definition.
That,
but with your
that means,
definition, yes.
with the definition that we are now working on, or working with, you don't know what perfection is. Because perfection means you're not imperfect. So you're saying, it's
You define
this.
perfect means free from all
Let me give you another
deficiencies.
example.
Free from all
This example is very
deficiencies,
close to your heart, right? And you understand it. Do you believe God is loving? Of course you do. Right. So, can your God become sometimes not loving? Become imperfect and not loving? Or is he always loving?
I would guess that if Jesus had sinned, then yes. But that didn't happen.
So basically,
happen.
what you're affirming, again, the all-loving God can stop from loving and be not loving. That's what you're saying.
If Jesus had sinned, I don't know what the full consequences of that would be, but I would suspect that it means that God at that point may not, or at least Jesus would not be loving. But that didn't happen. That's a hypothetical issue. It didn't happen.
We need to see you.
So God has not stopped being loving.
These amateurs.
I'm not absolutely sure that he could, but I suspect that is the case.
If you believe perfection, perfect being can become imperfect, that's what it means. That
With your definition.
He
With your
could
definition.
be not loving at all, right? Is God truth? Yes, of course he is truth.
I'm not sure about the
Is
is.
the truth? Can he be less than the truth and become not the truth and be opposite?
I'm not sure what that terminology means.
It is the source of all the truth, and he always speaks the truth.
Well, yeah, it's great. God always speaks the truth. Yes, absolutely. That's not really. What you were saying was far deeper than
So
that.
can he become imperfect and not always speak the truth in your concept of God?
While Jesus was a man on earth, he could have chosen to lie. He didn't, but he could have done. Satan genuinely tempted Jesus. He did not give in to Satan's temptation, but I believe the possibility was there that he could have done.
Fair enough. This is what you believe, right? We offer you Islam, an Islamic concept of God, where God is perfect all the time. We invite you to embrace this belief. Where listen,
that
Douglas,
perfection
listen.
naturally includes limitation.
Listen,
That
God
perfection
never.
naturally includes limitation.
Listen, we want you to embrace, we invite you to, is God is perfect all the time. He never becomes imperfect. And that's one of the reasons why he's worthy of worship. A perfect being.
And ultimately, I think that understanding of God is illogical. Ultimately, I think that understanding of God is illogical.
Illogical?
Because free from perfection means he doesn't have any limitation. But if you're free from perfection, you cannot become you cannot in any way subject yourself. Therefore, that is therefore a limitation. It naturally gives rise to a limitation. It becomes contradictory.
It's not.
It becomes contradictory. Therefore, I think it's illogical. That definition is illogical.
Let's have a look. So, if God has knowledge, did anyone give knowledge to God? The one God that we both believe in, right? Without making any difference to three centers of consciousness or not. Do you believe this one God received knowledge from outside?
No.
Right. So this is inherent.
Certainly for the sake of discussion, I'm going to say no.
So this knowledge is inherent. Can this knowledge be not perfect? It is inherent. In a being who did not begin
I'm not
to
sure it makes
exist.
sense to call knowledge perfect. Knowledge is knowledge.
If you are not given knowledge and you had it your own self, would your knowledge be limited?
My knowledge is limited.
Not you.
No, what are you saying?
Not you. A being that we're talking about who is God, who did not begin to exist, eternally in existence,
Right.
possessing knowledge,
Right.
would he be limited in his knowledge, like someone knows more than him, or someone restricts his knowledge?
There wouldn't be someone to restrict his knowledge, but
So his knowledge is unrestricted.
No. Just because there isn't someone to restrict doesn't mean that it's possible that there couldn't be a restriction.
By what?
Just because there's not an outside agent to do the restriction doesn't mean that the knowledge itself couldn't be restricted. As it happens, my understanding of Allah is his knowledge is unrestricted, and my understanding of Yahweh as a triune being, the whole of the triune being, is that his knowledge is not unrestricted too.
So you believe the knowledge of Yahweh can be restricted?
No, I mean philosophically, a knowledge of a divine being could be restricted. As it happens, the two divine beings that we believe in, Allah and Yahweh, their knowledge isn't unrestricted. It isn't restricted. It's unrestricted.
We believe the knowledge of Allah
He's
is
got
not
a
restricted.
microphone there.
Yes, I understand
Do you
that.
believe the knowledge of Yahweh is not restricted?
Yes.
Okay, so if it's not restricted, there's no limitation. That means he knows without any limitation.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, okay, certainly the Father, that's true, the Father, yeah.
If you have a being who has no limitation in the knowledge, is his knowledge perfect or imperfect?
I don't think it makes sense to call knowledge perfect or imperfect. It doesn't make sense to me. Knowledge is knowledge.
When I say
Complete, if you have knowledge of everything, but it doesn't make sense to
freeze to death
perfect or imperfect. It's knowledge is knowledge.
do you know anything
These
about
are
perfect
basic
love?
things God's
There's no such
attributes
thing, isn't
shouldn't be
there?
discussed.
Now you will say there is no such thing as perfect love, there is no such thing as perfect knowledge, there is no such thing as perfect forgiveness, there is no
There's
such
complete
thing.
knowledge. It's complete knowledge. I agree with
Complete.
complete knowledge. Yes.
So if something is complete,
Yahweh has complete knowledge. Allah has complete knowledge. In as much as they exist at all.
So he has no
Obviously,
deficiency.
you believe Allah
So
exists.
he has no
but
deficiency in his complete knowledge. Because
in
he's
his
not-
knowledge, he has no deficiency in his
Right.
knowledge.
That's what I mean by perfection.
Yes.
For you to make it simple, right? Right. So we invite you to worship God, Allah, who is perfect, complete in his knowledge, complete and perfect in his attributes.
Right.
Rather than someone who can be ignorant, weak, someone who doesn't know
I
what
made
he's
the
doing.
point that ultimately the Muslim concept of God is illogical, and I gave my reasons. I didn't explain it that well, but I tried to give my
Try
reasons why I
again.
believe
Try
that.
again.
And you were trying to respond to that.
Try again.
And your issue about
Douglas,
knowledge doesn't respond to that.
I would like you to give me the opportunity. How or why is the Muslim concept of God illogical?
Because the Muslim concept of God is that he's unlimited.
Why is
It's
that illogical?
unlimited. Because it naturally leads to a limitation. If he's unlimited, that means he can't become a man. One consequence of that is that he can't become a man. But that's a limitation in itself. He can't become a man. He can't do this one thing. So the
Man is
concept of an
limited.
unlimited being naturally leads to limitation. Therefore, it's illogical. It's self-contradictory.
Man is limited.
You're making a statement like this. You know what? The reason why something is not infinite because it cannot be finite. If we affirm something is infinite, by definition, this something is not finite. But you're saying no, this is illogical. Why? Because the infinite cannot become finite, so it's illogical. Does that make any sense?
Because the alternative God in the discussion, actually the Christian God, because I'm a Christian, is a God that did do that. Yes.
Illogical. Look. If this universe is here, is this universe infinite or finite?
We don't know.
Okay. What are the options? Did this universe
It could
have
have a finite value, it could have
Make
infinite
it
value.
easy. Did the universe have a beginning?
Yes.
If it had a beginning, Ultimately, it has to be based on cause of someone or something that is
Uncreated.
uncreated.
Yeah, okay, right.
Right?
Yeah.
Uncreated. Is that logical or illogical?
That's logical.
Logical. So you have to have a being, a cause for this universe who is uncreated, who is eternal, who is absolute, who is perfect.
Just because I believe the cause might be absolute and perfect doesn't mean that the philosophy tells me the cause has to be absolute and perfect.
Has to be.
No.
If it's not absolute, then it's dependent on something else, right?
Well, okay, now he's given a definition of the word absolute that I'm sure I don't think I would have given.
Is God dependent or independent?
For what?
On anything. And everything.
For most things, God is independent.
Is it? So for most things. That means he's dependent for something.
There might be some things which I can think of which he's dependent for. There might be
God
something.
is dependent on something.
No, I said there might be some things which I can think of. Well, certainly when Jesus came to earth, he was dependent on his Mary to give you food when he was a baby.
So now as you realize, if you remove Jesus' incarnation, everything seems to be you are redefining logic, you are redefining perfection, is because you have a problem with Jesus becoming like that. If that was the case, and you viewed it differently, then actually look, infinite is infinite. So if someone like Jesus Christ doesn't fit in the equation, shouldn't you be thinking, actually my belief in Jesus may be totally wrong, totally illogical instead? You are redefining logic, redefining perfection, redefining infinity, just because you have Jesus Christ who has done all of that contradictory to logic and rationality.
Well, one thing I know is I'm a limited human being, and if I'm to learn about God, God has to reveal himself to me. And when I look at Jesus, I see that's what God has done. When I look at the Bible and I look at Jesus, that's what I see God doing, revealing himself to me. So therefore, if my logic doesn't fit the God I see revealing himself to me, then my logic is the one that has to be wrong. So your argument is, because your logic doesn't make complete sense to you, therefore you should believe in Islam. Well, I would say that's wrong.
You understand perfection and completion.
I understand your definition of it.
Yes.
I don't necessarily agree that your definition you want to be
the
using.
God that you want to worship, he is not complete because he can be incomplete.
By your definitions of these words, yes.
Do you not agree with the definitions?
Not always, no.
Sometimes you agree, sometimes you disagree.
Yeah.
Why don't we have a common ground where we agree with the definitions? Right?
But then the problem with then is then leads to sentences that look like they're heretical. Where just because the definition's bad.